All right, and we are live. My name is Todd Anderson with avnirvana.com, and welcome to our third installment of AV Nirvana Live. Really glad you're joining us today. Just wanted to go through a couple of quick house cleaning things with you guys real quick before we bring on our featured guest of the day. First off, I wanted to bring this to your attention. We are hosting another really cool giveaway at avnirvana.com. And this time we're teaming up with Oro Technologies, the creator of Oro 3D. They have been great partners over the years, and they are giving away the 2014 demo disc and their demo disc volume 2 to one lucky winner. Now, much like our last giveaway with Scenic Labs, where we gave away a bias lighting kit and a 4K calibration disc, the winner, or you can enter from anywhere around the world. So Oro is being really, really cool about this, and they will ship anywhere in the world. So if you'd like to enter this contest, head over to avnirvana.com. Right on the homepage, you'll see something that looks very similar to what is on the screen there. And just click on that. You have to be a member to enter, but membership is completely free. And we'll be drawing a winner on March 7th. Now, also, I wanted to say for all of you that are joining us live today, if you want to participate in the chat, please feel free. You can ask a question. We have a few questions submitted by AV Nirvana members and a few folks on Twitter over the last week. But if you're watching live and you have a question, drop it into the comments and we will answer it for you. So today's guest is Chris Seymour from Seymour-Screen Excellence. And they are makers of some of the coolest home theater projection screens on the planet. I actually just had one installed in my own theater room. It's from their trim line, and it is a 237-1 CinemaScope screen with masking that comes in on the sides to create a 16:9 screen. And I've been using it for about a week, and it's just totally blowing my socks off. Just loving it. So it's been a great addition to my home theater. And yeah, so really excited to have Chris join us. So I'm going to bring him in with us right now. Hey there, Chris.
Hey.
How's it going today?
Doing well.
Awesome. So Chris, I have to ask you, you have a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. You minored in economics. You have an MBA from New York Institute of Technology. How did you get into projection screens?
It's either a warning or advice when people tell you to combine your hobby with your work, and then they claim that you don't ever feel like you're working again. It's maybe both a warning and so that's what I did. I mean, I've always been working in audio and theater and 2-channel, multi-channel music, exploding robots. It's my favorite things. Awesome.
And that just naturally led right into the screen business.
Sure. I saw an unidentified need at the time. I think the only projection screen out there that was acoustically transparent and woven. There's a lot of benefits about that we'll kind of dig into, but the only player at the time was Screen Research, I believe. And I wanted this product, but it's, $7,000, and it was kind of ivory colored and dim and didn't have the velvet borders in the retractable, at least. So I thought, I can do better than this. And so I started DIYing for a while, then developed a new material. And then, we started digging into the forums, and people tell you what they hate and what they love, and go from there.
About how long ago did that all?
2007 is when things started cooking. So
you've been at it for a while.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you have your relationship with Screen Excellence, which basically combines Seymour AV with Screen Excellence, which is a company based out of England. Is that correct?
Yes. My colleague, Patrice Congard, is very French, but England is where the headquarters is, where the manufacturing facility is. And we met in 2008 or so, but around 2010, we decided that we could be better together than trying to compete with each other. And he needed U.S. manufacturing really for the custom market. I mean, if you don't want to have to wait another day for your phones to be, or your email to be answered, across the ocean. You can literally call, and I can either talk to the person that's making the screen, or we can throw a heavy object at that person. And the custom market really needs that, because if they're missing a bracket or they need another one, I mean, this stuff's important.
They need it now.
Exactly. These are not build to stock problems. This is build to order. So,
did you and Patrice both bring something unique to the table?
Yeah, so I had the patent on the retractable, where we put the fabric velvet on the borders, hide the tab tension cables back behind it, and some innovative things. And he was, I think at the time, just painting his material like really every other screen company does. But then he had innovative masking screens. That's our TAM screen, was his masking screen at the time. And so he had the Enlighter 4K material he was coming out with, which at the time was like crazy good, fine. It was the only material that was like just impossibly fine. So yeah, we brought materials together, we brought designs together, and I think it's one of the cases where we ended up being more than the sum of the parts. So
yeah, that's really awesome. I've actually had a chance to meet him at CEDIA. Really nice guy.
Yeah, deep acoustics background. He's been doing some speakers work too, but he's over there and I'm here, and I'm plugged into the forums. Having somebody local that knows what the US wants is important. For
sure. Yeah. Now, so speaking of the screen materials that you all offer, I counted up 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different materials. Does that sound about right?
Sounds about right.
So you have your AT screens, and then you have your non-AT. And I think the most recent addition is the Ambient Visionaire Black.
Yep, Ambient Visionaire Black. It's a wider. There's 2 gain levels. There's a 1.2, which is that's the one that we take to the trade shows at like CES, where the walls are ivory, the ceiling's light. And I just want to show you how good the black levels can be. It's a little bit narrower, but in one of the slides we'll get into viewing angles. But we wanted to widen that out with a 0.8 gain material. So that's what our most recent material is.
And what's really cool about that is the fact that it has nano mirrors all over it. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, they're impossibly small. I've never actually seen one. We've just looked at computer models of what they're doing.
So how do you know it's there?
Right? As soon as I look at them, they go away, I guess.
It's really incredible to think about.
Schrodinger's
millions of mirrors applied onto the surface. Is that?
Yep. And you can change, we can have control over their angle that they're dithered at. And then in between those are carbon particles, so that stuff comes in from the sides. It gets eaten, generally speaking. Wow. And then the mirrors dictate kind of what your viewing angle is. And then, of course, the substrate contributes too. So we have things to balance for the different applications.
Wow, that's really cool. So I'll drop a link down into the description below, a link over to your website. So anybody that's interested, they can head over there and read more about all the various materials and see how to get in contact with you all. So what we're going to do today is we're going to try our best to keep this within a half hour. I don't know if that's possible, but we're going to try. And we are going to run through 3 things that someone should consider when they are purchasing a projection screen. And it's tough to really narrow it down just to 3 things, because I think we could probably sit here and list about 15 things. But we tried to pick out 3 that we thought were probably the best, kind of the most important factors to consider. And we're going to kick things off with room factors. And let me bring on.
I think we get another 30 minutes, not counting the first 10 minutes.
That's right. That's right. We
can
keep hitting reset.
Right. Starting now.
Starting now. So there's Patrice, and I probably should have had this up
Patrice
earlier.
So our background, because we both came from this dedicated cinema, full-size speakers should be behind the screen, as just like the mastering studios do it. So this is kind of the one slide that would show kind of where we came from is that the cinematic image and acoustics needs to be properly cinematic, for lack of a better word. But you know, you really start to do that math, that 40 to 45 degree wide viewing angle. If you look at, say, 110 inch wide and diagonal, 126 diagonal, so not quite 11 feet. You need to sit about 11 to 12 feet from that. Now that's a common seating distance for flat panels in your room. You might be sitting 11 feet from the TV, but I haven't seen too many rooms where they actually scored a 126 inch diagonal screen on their wall. So there's still a gap between the flat panel based home theater configuration and what really would be considered cinematic. Now maybe that'll close with, you know, panel build on wall screens. I think I saw
micro LEDs. Yeah.
Micro LEDs. The 98 inch came out at CES from was it TCL, I think, or something. Somebody introduced a 98 inch diagonal flat panel and an aggressive price. There's a limit to how big a sheet of glass you can ship somebody.
For sure.
So, you know, so 98 is okay, but that's like at the tiniest size of what we're making in projection screens.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, the CC'd just had a demo out in Beverly Hills this past week that I covered remotely, and their screen was 165 inches diagonal, but it's also $275,000.
Yeah. And I think, you know, the Venn diagram, I think we'll see some convergence of those. The big question is what happens? I mean, what happens to cinema as it's been? Does it start to be more TV-like and so forth?
Right.
Acoustics. Yeah. You get the micro LEDs. You're not going to put your speakers behind them. And I got
totally.
a lot of reasons why you should do that. So.
Yeah. Well, hopefully projectors can keep up and continue to offer, you know, more than what a screen is going to offer to the general public.
And so the premise that we started with is that when you can detach those, where you can treat what do you want for an image, size, location, height, versus what do you want acoustically, size, location, configuration, whatever's going on acoustically. When those are independent of each other, then you can optimize both. And so that's where, you know, we exhibit like Expona 2-channel shows. I love audiophiles and kind of hate them because I am one, but right. So they'll argue, you know, nothing in front of my speakers is best. Well, what are you doing then? I mean, you just have no video, or you just put a little, you know, TV up there. I mean, what are you doing for video? Because kick that to the curb. Versus then the videophile folks who are like, okay, you know, we have to have this giant sheet of opaque vinyl, and nothing can compete with that. And then I argue, well, what are you putting your speakers on the floor? I mean, you're killing other aspects of the room, and the room is this marriage of just all these different aspects. I mean, carpet color, paint color, lighting, everything goes into this holistic experience.
For sure.
I mean, unless you're watching silent films, I argue that's not the best video screen. I mean, we make them, but this kind of what we snapshotted in this picture here behind Lilu there is what we try to, I mean, that's like best practice.
And to your point, I mean, really, when you start off looking for a screen, I'm assuming that the size of your room really drives.
Oh yeah. Room configuration. We'll go through kind of some screen constraints that you would face in those, but viewing distance is a big deal. I mean, your 60, 70 inch flat panel could be cinematic if you're sitting 4, 5, 6 feet from it. And that can be done, but you're less likely to then have more than a couple, 3 seats. I mean, if you want 4 or 6 or 8, you know, and then just things start to grow out. And that's where you're crossing into theater world. Yeah. Your phone can be cinematic if you're close enough to it, but you know,
or if you strap it to your face,
right.
Which I've actually seen. Some guy created this cardboard box where he mounted the phone right onto.
Didn't Google do that? I think, or something.
I think maybe somebody. Yeah,
they had a VR. Like,
pretty funny. So let's see here. So let's talk about room. What kind of factors do you see as the most important factors to be considering when you're talking about a room?
Getting that image properly cinematic, and there's no hard and fast rule. You've seen here in the slide a picture of a theater. There'll be, for some reason, some guy sitting in that, second row, first chair all the way to the left. Like, there's that guy. I don't get it, but there's always that person. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, though, I think this audience would agree that we're going into kind of that pink zone of happiness there, and some people prefer it really big, almost head turning. Some people, dial down that 24 frames a second flying across, and they want to be a little further back. But generally, that 36 to 45 degree viewing angle is the sweet spot. You can see there in that chart that's there's reference, there's ideal, recommended. That's where that sweet spot is, right in the middle of the theater.
Okay. So if you go too small.
If you go too small, it's just not cinematic. I mean, you're watching, more like a TV.
Right. But you're also shrinking that sweet spot, correct?
Yep. And if you are shrinking it too much and it's a really bright image, you start to get that flashlight in the eyeballs of eye fatigue. That's where flat panels, really bright flat panels in a really dark room can become fatiguing, and they have bias lighting. And with flat panels, you can turn on some room lighting. And so there's some ways to solve that. But that's not a problem when you go properly huge. Go into a Dolby Cinema, for example, or an IMAX. You don't get that because your whole eyes are invested into the screen, and that's where you get up a little closer. There's been some research come out that people prefer even this, a 60 degrees, 70 degree viewing angle that gets pretty head turning. And with film being 24 frames a second, we raise a yellow flag with that. I mean, if you want that screen, we'll totally make it, but we'll raise the yellow flag and say that if you've had experience at that and you want that, cool. But that starts, you need experience to do that. Now, maybe high frame rates coming out will help that. Don't do interpolation. I don't know. It's a weird effect. I've got opinions on high frame rate.
Interesting. Well, tell me, can you describe for people that are watching, what kind of issues you run into if you get out of that kind of sweet spot off to the sides?
Oh, you mean like just off axis?
Yeah, if you're too far off axis, and if your room is incredibly, let's say, wide,
okay,
and you have seating that's spread out outside of this optimal zone, I guess you could say.
Yep.
What happens? What would someone see that they wouldn't otherwise be experiencing in the middle?
I think if the image is properly large, you can start to deal with that. Okay, I sit off axis in our theater just fine because the image is properly large. Mm-hmm. So larger does help with that. The other aspect is acoustically. I'm a big fan of towing in your left-right speakers so that they actually cross in front of the center seating.
Okay, and
so that way, this person on this side, you're not listening directly on access to the we're not mirror flipping, are we? So this is my left here.
Yeah.
Probably you're right. I don't know, but you're not hearing that speaker on axis. It would be towed in, firing the other way. So it attenuates and pulls that down more, versus the other side actually would be aiming toward that offmost seat. And you're widening out that sweet spot. So acoustically, there's tricks for that. The acoustic experts would also argue that your first reflection points and how those things are treated is a huge deal for that as well.
Right.
And half of what you listen to is the room. So,
visually speaking, are you just talking about it like a drop in brightness, or is it like our color?
It can. If you have a screen that's above 1, then the screen's not making light; it's just focusing the light. So 1 is like a perfect, 180 degrees. Below 1 is just 180 degrees, and you turn the volume knob down. Mm-hmm. But as you go above 1, you're starting to narrow the viewing cone. So with that narrowing viewing cone, you get a couple trade-offs. One is on your screen, you'll see hot spotting, and that's where the middle is hotter than the corners. Right. And projectors have a natural degree of hot spotting anyway, because the middle of the lamp is brighter than the corners. So you can measure some difference, but they're usually pretty good. Mm-hmm. But if you compound that with your screen, it can have that effect. And in addition, so you get the hot spotting there, you get the lower brightness in the corners, but you can get color shifting. You can get a different image brightness per seat. So you can really blow out that middle seat, and the far seat might be dim. So the higher the gain, the more trade-offs you get with that, which is why we try to stay like around 2 is our limit.
Okay. And I guess the take-home message is big room, go big with the screen.
Yeah.
Essentially, right?
I think in the 13, 14 years, I think I've only had 1 or 2 customers actually then say they went too big. So it's super, super rare. More often than not, it's you start up a project, you want to build this theater in your house. Everyone else in the family is skeptical. But then when the result is there, everybody loves it. It's like the first place you take your company to. Kids love it, grandmas, everybody. It's the best room in the house.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so what are we looking at here?
The takeaway here is the folks that are doing multiple rows on this. So, we advocate you would make your job easier if you can minimize that row spacing. Now that's not to say that you lean back. You want somebody's feet massaging your head. I mean, maybe if you're into that, but a little bit of spacing. But you don't need to be reclined and have 3 feet of aisleway and in between. So just squeeze that together, because in this diagram you're seeing a screen. It's 144 inches wide by 60 inches high, scope ratio.
Huge.
And if we look 10 feet to that first row, 15 feet to the middle row, and 20 feet to the back row, the viewing angles become all over the map. And it's not necessarily a disadvantage. Maybe for Cloverfield, you want to sit in the back row so you don't get killed with the shaky camera, versus the really nice slow documentary. You're going through the Grand Canyon type stuff. You maybe want to be in the front row for that.
Right.
But trying to get everyone a responsible viewing and listening experience. I mean, maybe like this is a row of 5 across. I would maybe do 4 across. Like just try to contain it and try to squish it together.
So try and contain the width.
Yeah, width and distance.
And distance. I guess that kind of also goes into just in general. Let's say you have 1 row of seats. What are and we had talked about this a few days ago. What are the kind of the guidelines these days? Let's say considering Blu-ray and 4K content for seating distance. I mean, how it's getting more and more confusing as resolution is getting better.
Yeah, as the quality of what we're maybe not content quality, but production quality of what we're watching improves. We're seeing that those angles open up. It used to be THX, say 36 degrees is the sweet spot, but that's DVD days. I mean, they've grown that now. It was 40 degrees. I think now we're at about 45 degrees for that viewing angle. Now, if you're looking at a taller screen, say a 16:9, that normal TV shape, that's where we'll raise the yellow flag, is that 40 to 45 degree. We'll say this is perfect. If you want to go bigger, just be careful. Now, scope, you can actually handle a bit more. It's a bit more of that Cinerama feel. You can go 45, 50 before we'll start to raise the flag on that. But, again, it depends if you're looking at the super well-produced 4K, the kimono girl with the flag and or waving the fan and the cherry blossoms. I mean, it can, go huge. You can almost make a dome, but it's still 24 frames a second. Watch Transformers if you have to. And that can be abusive.
Can you go too big, though? I mean, is there a formula that you use with a customer? Let's say they say, hey, listen, I can get a maximum of 12 feet away from the screen. Does that also drive what kind of screen you're going to recommend?
Yeah, we like to start there. Like that's almost the first question is how far do you think you're going to be sitting back? How many rows you think you're doing? It's a big deal because that just dials in, okay, what size family are we looking at here? Obviously, being able to light up the screen properly with your projector. I mean, if you've got a huge room and you're thinking a huge screen, then that's great. But we got to be talking about light levels and what you're actually going to be able to light up with that too.
For sure. Throw distance, I guess, with the projector. Distance,
especially if it's a reflective screen. So those higher gain screens with those narrower angles, the throw distance becomes important.
Cool.
But then, we're still with film. I mean, 24 frames a second. I love it. I don't really like high frame rate stuff unless it's for video, like football, or there's one demo piece we do with orchestra. It's 60 frames a second, and it looks more like you're watching a play, in that case, versus something live versus something that's filmed. So it's a totally different look, and that can look really beautiful and great at really large sizes. But again, film. You don't want to watch Lord of the Rings, and one of my favorite films, 24 frames for a second flying across the screen.
I'm with you on that one. I mean, well, Gemini Man was, I think that was that
was high frame rate.
That was high frame rate, but they're pretty far and few between at this time.
Because they look so different. That Billy Lynn's halftime walk, I use that as one of the pieces, and I just throw it in. I'm like, does anyone, not to diss on the film, but do you like this look? And a lot of people have said, it's like they're watching a play. And otherwise, super good actors, like they look awkward. I don't know. Film has a look to it, an art to it. It's almost maybe like you put a little bit of a painting into that picture. Like it's got a little bit of a feel to it.
Yeah, and I think I read, or someone told me that it actually changes the way that the actors move about, during scenes when they're being shot.
Yeah, I bet. I have not seen Gemini Man, but those are interesting, if at least for a technical exercise right now.
Yeah.
Who knows, where they'll be going with that in general.
So let's see what we have here.
So this is an example of a scope screen. So in that previous room where you've got the multiple rows, one of the things that can become an issue if you get big is people's heads are going to block the bottom. So that could be a vote for, keep the scope screen, and you're then dodging everyone's heads. Also handy if you're not doing acoustically transparent, your center channel can be a little higher, because if you do 16:9, the center channel's down really low.
Yeah, that's no good.
Multiple rows, like you don't even have line of sight or line of hearing to those channels, and that's 80% of your sound. Like it's the most important speaker in the room, and you're not even in line with it. Like it's those rooms are terrible. No offense.
Yeah, that is definitely. I mean, that goes into speaker location, and when you're considering the room, you really do have to think about how you're going to be deploying your speakers. Earlier, you had an image of speakers, behind the screen. Well, then the screen doesn't really encroach on those speakers because it's an AT screen, and you can go as big as you want. But if, like myself, I have large towers that flank my screen, and my center channel is up behind the screen, but that did drive somewhat how much screen width wise I could fit into my room. Which is a bit of a bummer. If I had a different shaped room, I'm sure I would love to put all the speakers behind it. It's just in my particular case, speaking of, the size of the room and how far away I can sit from the screen and all these types of factors, I just couldn't fit, my mains behind the screen. But
the room is a huge vote in this. Like if you have in your first scope screen, if you have standard 8-foot ceilings and you're trying to accommodate a couple rows, you're going to run into a height issue real quick. And so that's where a scope screen can fix that. It's a tweakier format. It's good really for the cinema buff. About 70% of films are still made in that scope ratio. But it's tweakier. You're going to have to zoom, lens memory, shift, focus. You're going to almost be setting up, and you're going to play projectionist for each film to get that kind of dialed in and perfect. And the tweakers like me, not really tweaker, that's the wrong word. The tweaky people like me.
The adjusters.
Yeah, I love it. I love doing that. But like for my brother, for example, would hate it. He just wants, to turn things on and sit down. So there's, if you're that person, then you want, I think the next slide we have, which is the 16:9 ratio.
Yeah.
Now, the all consumer video is this format. So even if you get your 4K projector and it's got the 4096 pixels wide, it's got 17:9 ratio. Don't worry about those. Keep it 1:1 scaling. All of your set it and forget it video is this shape. You'll just have differing amounts of black pixels on the bottom and top, depending on any aspect ratios. higher than that. The old stuff, of course, you'll get pillar boxes on the side, but that's always the case.
Which, you know, to your point, I mean, you have this in this image, the blue bars are basically where masking would go if you are going CinemaScope on a screen like this. And, you know, if you're watching a CinemaScope shot or a 240-1 shot film without that masking, it can be distracting. The gray, you know, I have a JVC NX7 projector, and, you know, even that on the, you know, where masking covers up the grays, there are different variations of shades. You know, there's like a kind of a blacker bar and then a gray. And once you pick up on it, now I don't think anyone else in my family ever picked up on it. They, you know, but
they will if you point it out to them, and then they're ruined. Like they
may,
like,
or they just may not care. I don't know, but they. Someone like myself, you know, that's one of the reasons why I eventually was like, okay, I'm ready to pull the trigger and get a screen with motorized masking, because it does start to drive you a little crazy.
If you lived in a bat cave, I mean, the ideal room, let's say black velvet walls, ceiling, black carpet, everything, then that effect is then only limited by your projector choice. So again, your projector, maybe you've got super good optics. JVC is great for that. Those black bars will be, you know, darker. And then especially if you get some ambient light rejecting screen with a darker substrate. But those have trade-offs. Living in a bat cave can have trade-offs. You might not be married then any longer. You know, so
have a dedicated room.
Right. So it's a complicated set of equations to go into that, but you can solve everything with masking. I mean, you just mask it, and the screen has changed shape to match what you're watching, and it's always framed perfectly.
Awesome.
So this taller, you know, that taller screen, you know, that would say, like, if you're width constrained in your room, you do have height, maybe it's a single row of seating, a taller screen would vote for that. And that's where AT, I think, does really well, acoustically transparent. It's because then you don't have to have that speaker, you know, sitting on the floor. I mean, that's a terrible location for dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you want the tweeters of your front three to be on the same plane.
Yep. So that's how it's mastered. It is, you know, everything's behind the screen. It goes across. It's on axis, away from the floor. You can be more away from the walls if you want. You know, again, do what's acoustically best.
Yeah, definitely. You know, for those of you out there that are thinking about putting a big screen into your room, these are things that you definitely want to consider. Speakers can drive a lot of the equation of what kind of screen.
Yeah, we say, you know, don't shrink the speakers down to those, you know, like little Bose thingies up in the corners or something. No one should have to do that under duress. That would be my sign to others that I'm imprisoned against my will and being held. But
I think also it depends on if, you know, I'm a person that, you know, my theater room, it's dedicated, like you're called a bat cave. It is a bat cave. It's all black rug, black walls. Nice. It soaks up all the light, but I also use it to listen to 2-channel music. So having those towers appropriately placed was really important to me. That's one of the reasons why I didn't want to put speakers into my wall. But, you know, if you're more inclined to just watch movies, that makes that choice fairly easy, because there's a lot of options out there for you to get the speakers behind your screen and really maximize the screen size.
Even if you have floor standers, we have ceiling mounted retractables you can kind of put in front of all of that too. So the depth behind the wall, if you're not willing to build, you know, your own kind of false wall in front of that, there's a lot of ways to solve that.
Yeah.
We have TV, the flat panel, and they have, and as much as maybe I don't like them, but you have the 3 speakers around, you know, that flat panel. And that can work fine for watching, you know, your Dr. Phil. And then when you want to watch a film, you can drop an AT screen in front of all of that, and you don't have to move anything. So there's a lot of applications for that.
Cool. So
this is the apex predator this is the one screen to rule them all.
Yes.
Is the
kind of digging into aspect ratio. I think we still have some room stuff to talk about.
Okay.
But this one,
this would keep you just completely agnostic. You don't care what shape the screen is. So if it's the Hateful Eight super wide, or if it's the Avatar super tall, or no, Zack Snyder, that one came out like that 4:3 ratio.
Yeah, that really threw
that one might be even a little punitive on a constant area screen, depending on how big you go to start with. But you generally don't care what shape it is, because you're going to reframe the screen for whatever it is. And there is a popular ratio coming out, that 2.0 ratio. I put 2.07 on there because mathematically that's dead in the middle. But 2.0 is, we call that the Netflix ratio around here. That's the widest that the producers are allowed to go on Netflix without getting special permission. So that's where you'll see the Squid Games or Ozark. Yeah, they're under content. And they want to have that cinematic feel. So they want a wider look to it, but they're not going to go all the way to a scope, because I think the Netflix is flat panels are super popular. There's a lot of them out there. So, not everybody's going to be able to experience that completely. A 2 is right in the middle. We have some people that just go with a 2, and you can just kind of live in the middle and lens memory your way around that. And occasionally something will actually fit your screen.
Yeah.
But it's a popular ratio these days.
Huh. And for those of you out there that don't know what you're looking at here, basically this is showing a screen that has 4-way masking. I guess, is that probably the best description?
Or where those boundaries would lie. But we do 4-way masking, up to about 30 feet. So.
Boy, that's incredible.
We can do it, or we can do the poor man's version, where it's like magnetic panels and things. We could motorize a set of top bottom and then have magnetic panels on the sides. I mean, there's ways to solve that even for just a few $100.
What do you do with those panels, by the way, when you're not using them? You have to have a special storage.
Set them off the side, put them and throw them in a closet or something. But
yeah, that introduces a whole nother set of problems.
It does. And
so you got your bat cave, and then you have to tell your family you're also storing these very delicate panels underneath the couch or whatever.
They're framed in metal, so you could murder somebody with that if you wanted. But like a top bottom set, we'll typically split that, so you'll get 2 top, 2 bottom. And we've had some requests where they didn't want that split; they wanted it continuous, which looks great, but you're swinging around a 10-foot framed piece of metal. I mean.
Oh, I see. So if you have masking that comes in on the side. The top and bottom piece would just be the width of where the masking
would be. Yeah. So in a magnetic masking panel, they've requested that be a full non-spliced width. So that's a pretty unwieldy piece of equipment there. But maybe they just drop it down in front, the speakers, and it's great. It's fine. It's easy. But I wouldn't want to be swinging that around, because I would take out some windows.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we can do the motorized versions too, obviously, and those all self-tuck away and sort of roll up however.
Right. Yeah, and they really do disappear. It's very cool to see. Okay, so here we're looking at dedicated versus multi-use rooms, which we were kind of talking about, but
and this is just the spread of people's rooms by numbers. Most people are that picture on the right. They're using a flat panel, and they're kicking that experience up with a subwoofer and some surround speakers, maybe some ceiling speakers. And those are handy if you've got light colored surfaces, if you got open windows. That's that multi-purpose, multi-use room. That'd be the case, in my house, like off from the kitchen, would be a multi-purpose room. But if you can go downstairs where you've got light control, maybe fewer windows, you can get darker surfaces, then that's where, in that picture from showing an IMAX theater, that you got to put the speakers right behind the screen like that.
Right.
Because, where else are you going to put them? So.
Yeah, exactly. It says dark surfaces. I mean, in terms of dark surfaces, what qualifies as a dark surface? Are we talking black, or is it grays? Can you?
Black's ideal, but not everybody can live with that. Neutral tone is a good way, obviously a good target. So these rooms have, red all over the walls and red light. You're putting red onto your screen, and you can't suck that out. You can't undo that with the calibration. So you're contaminating your image.
Right.
One trick we'll be doing in one of our demo theaters is to have a lot of cherry wood paneling and woodworking. So it's kind of an orange tint, but then we'll balance that by having a navy blue fabric where the acoustic transparent products are,
Okay.
treatments and such. And so if I hit this perfectly, the net splash back from the room will still be a nice neutral.
Okay.
For example.
Yeah, yeah, and just to make it clear, if you don't have a projector, basically what he's talking about, what Chris is talking about, is the light that's reflecting off the screen, off your wall, and then back onto the screen. Essentially,
Yeah.
If you have red walls, particularly, can be very bad. But even white walls,
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
you're contaminating, as you say. That's a great word. You're contaminating what the image, is presenting to your eyes. So,
Yep. And we say you don't have to go, totally to a complete that bat cave look, but maybe you do a forest green or a navy blue or a burgundy or something. Just hitting those darker tones. This is the one room you want to spend some money painting the ceiling. You can advance your image generations of projectors forward with just some dark paint. Like $100 in black paint is the cheapest video tweak you could ever have in a room. So this is where to talk the boss into just, can we go medium gray even? Like, can we just get away from white?
For sure. Yeah. And actually in my own room, I used an ultra flat black from Benjamin Moore. This is like, it's the flattest paint that I could find. It's flatter. It's more, less reflective than, flat paint from like Home Depot or whatever. Right. The problem with it, and it's amazing. I mean, it really is soaking up so much light. The problem is if you touch it, it is forever marked.
Right.
So, it
shows
so
every little handprint.
Yeah. The front quarter of my room is all black.
Yeah.
And then I have a dividing strip. And then the back is this like really dark grayish color.
Yeah.
It's a little more durable because we have dogs, and my daughter's friends come over and they want to put a pillow down and lean against the wall, and having all black walls with that super flat paint was not a good thing for myself. So I'd walk in the room and see the marks, instantly, where the dog put his paws or whatever. So something to consider. And you had mentioned before some kind of dark fabric.
Yeah, this is the room to try to put as much fabric treatments as you can, even if they're just curtains or a tapestry if you're that fancy. But acoustic treatments on the walls, and maybe you don't have to go black fabric on everything, a navy fabric, but just fabric in general is 10 to 20 times more light absorbing than the flattest paint you could ever get, which is why we went with retractables with a fabric velvet border instead of painting it, because even painting it with, you'll still get, again, like 10 to 20 times the light reflection back than you would a pile velvet, for example.
When you're looking at material like that, do you need to be careful about flame?
Yeah,
retardant.
Yeah, and they're responsible. I mean, the good companies that sell the acoustic treatments that are fabric wrapped, they'll of course they'll have a flame rating on them. Right. Curtains probably aren't as well regulated. You can probably hang anything up as a curtain, but
sure.
But yeah, of course, the more fire resistance, obviously, the better.
Yeah,
but this is an easy aspect of the room to do that. It might be hard to get fire resistant seating or something, but on the fabric in the walls, there's tons of Guilford of Maine, but there's a lot of commercial options for that.
Yeah, so something to look out for there. Speaking of wall color, this is a really cool video that Chris, let me see how I can start this. Chris sent over. So here, I'll play it. And Chris, maybe you can tell us what we're looking at here.
This was a customer in Europe. It's actually off the forums I took this, but this was a guy that wanted to demonstrate with his handy assistant here, the difference between a white room and a dark room. So he has these retractable velvet shades, and just look at how much a dark room, the change in checkerboard, and we'll play that again for you here. That contrast they're able to get in that checkerboard versus a white room. And a lot of people can just throw that image up, what we're seeing right here, and they may be completely fine with that until you educate them of their ways. But this just really shows a difference in what room splash contamination
can for
be.
Sure. Boy, that's a really incredible example.
Yeah,
right there. Very convincing. Did he build those curtains himself, or I don't know what you would
If I
call it.
remember right, yeah, I think it was on ABS Forum. But yeah, just curtain tracks along the sides, and he had, basically it's a 3-sided, curtain, and you go up with your wand and you kind of, pull it up, and it, addresses the room. Innovative solution. I haven't seen it anywhere else, but I like to show this to folks. If at least I can get them to a gray paint color, or again, those midtones, like, you could, they could freeze the video halfway across and be like, just at least look at where you got yourself there. Maybe you can't go all the way to a non-reflective room, ideal room, but
right.
Anything is better.
Look at the ceiling there.
Yeah, splash off the ceiling. Even with these gain screens, ambient light rejecting screens, you still get a ton of light off of the ceiling. So that's usually the first place to look.
Right. And
but boy, a white screen on a white ceiling, yeah, it's chaos.
You're in trouble. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of wasting your money on the gear that you're buying. I mean, at that point, it's like buying.
Why are you paying for? Why are you paying for contrast ratio then? It's like you're just
right.
And you can amp up your image. You can double the brightness of your projector and get a plenty bright image, but you're doubling your splashback. So you're not really gaining anything. Now, a gray screen can help in theory with this. Let's say you go down to a 0.8 gain screen. So you're below 1. You've reduced by 20% the amount of light splashing off that screen, but it's also to your eyeballs. And then that light bouncing off the room back to the screen gets reduced another 20%. So if you take 80% times 80%, you can, in theory, you can get a 36% reduction in splashback contamination. It's minor, so it can help. We do make great gray screens, but they don't solve.
It's got to be better than cranking up the brightness, because I mean, at some point, your eyes are going to get scorched by
it can
too much brightness, and then if your walls are light colored. I mean, you're basically, that brightness on the walls is also getting jacked up too. So I don't know.
And it depends on the content that you're showing. That the checkerboard is worst case because you've got some bright parts and some black parts, and you're able to really then see your contrast. In mixed video, it's not as harsh, but we're just trying to show what's going on. And you can solve that to some degree by ambient light projection screens. So this is an example. We're showing a screen where you got some lighter colored walls, some ambient lighting. Even that light bulb is in between the camera and the screen. And you're still able to get some good dark levels with that.
For sure. Yeah, that's a beautiful image on there. Now, for ambient light rejecting screens, is there directionality to where it's blocking light from? Can it only block from the sides and not up and down, or is it?
It depends on what technology they're using. Our screens are omnidirectional, so we don't care if it's ceiling splash or if it's this light bulb off to the side. It doesn't matter. But there are other screen companies that make features that they're really focused on blocking the ceiling, for example, and you really see that in the ultra short throw light screens. It's a lot of
That's what I was thinking of. I know Epson had a screen that was I think it's almost described it as a step screen.
It's a lenticular lens.
There you go.
It's like those 3D stickers you use as a kid. You rub your fingernail on it and go zick, zick, zick.
Yep.
Don't do that at the trade show. Don't go up to their demo at the trade show and do that.
Oh my gosh. You just bought yourself a screen.
Yeah, a little pro tip.
Right. Now, which screen material is being shown here? Is that the Visionaire Black?
Yes,
it is. Okay.
Yes,
and that's a completely black screen.
It's about 87% dark, I think. So it's that background is very low gain. I mean, you would measure it as low as, again, I think 0.13. So it'd make a terrible screen if we just did the substrate by itself. But it's those reflectors then back that actually then get that projected light back to your eyeballs, and so then it doesn't behave like a 0.13. It actually behaves, in the end, it behaves like a 1.2.
And in terms of color, I mean, are you getting the same colors reflected back that you would off a white screen, or does the black screen kind of encroach on that a little?
in our development of the screen, we stayed neutral in what we're using. So there's no polarizer layers. There's nothing that can introduce color fringing or color shifting. We stay in the grayscale with everything we're doing.
Okay.
So we don't have color shifting. It does have a little bit different look though, because your contrast is amped up. Whites tend to look, the more aggressive you go, the whites tend to look like reflected light back at you, versus like if you just light up a white screen, white is white. But it's a different look. It maybe has more of a digital look to it, a bit more flat panel-ish looking look versus kind of that more analog film screen look. Some people love it, some people hate it.
Yeah, interesting. Hey, I see Gary in Cape Town, South Africa. It must be nighttime. There, he just joined us. So, hey, Gary, how are you doing?
Welcome, Gary.
All right. So, speak of the devil. Here's the Ambient Visionaire screen with your Nano Mirrors.
Yeah, the ones I've never seen, the Schrodinger's mirrors. So this is just the computer model of zooming in super deep. This would actually be a 16K pixel. So even on that 16K pixel, I think it's you get a few thousand, or at least maybe a few hundred. I don't know. I don't do math in public, but you get a lot of mirrors.
Where do you source Nano Mirrors?
Where do you source them?
Yeah, I mean,
it's somewhere up in the North Pole, I think.
It's
like sprinkled, right?
You just like sprinkle them around.
Right. But this is just a zoom in showing kind of what we're doing, and then you can change each feature to kind of play with the parameters of what your result is.
Okay.
But it's not resolution limiting. And so we're trying to maximize when we develop this. I want as many reflectors and as small as possible, so it reduces that pearlescent-y look, reduces the chances that you'll catch a sparkle. So the more mirror, like with the acoustically transparent screens, and we'll dig deeper into how we do those. But I want every feature shrunk down as much as possible. Because if you just take a sheet of vinyl and you spray some silver paint on it, it's going to be like a star field,
For sure, yeah.
One of the things we challenge the folks at our CES demos is we tell them there's always like some sofa off to the side, because you can't get rid of all the furniture, and you want some places to sit. But some people are sitting and watching your demo with a really terrible seat. But I'll put people in that seat when they ask about viewing angles, and that's because it's not as bad as the numbers would seem. If you're off, if you're at what they call the half gain. And so that's where you're at that point off axis where the gain of the screen is half of what it would be if you were dead on. And half sounds terrible. And nobody wants half an image brightness. But it looks 80% as bright to your eye, because your eye is non-logarithmic in its response. So I put people in those seats and I'm like, hey, it's not bad, right? I mean, it's 80% as bright. So that's why I try to show people that. And we still take into consideration their viewing angles, if they got really wide sofas or another room is watching into it, kind of thing. It's certainly part of the room we talk about, but I'm just saying, don't run for the hills when you see it's like 45 degrees. Well, I'm going to sit at 40, and that's gonna be terrible. Like, actually, it's not.
And you notice, I mean, I didn't really identify our other topic areas, which we've kind of touched on, which are screen material and aspect ratio, but we've talked a lot about the room.
Yeah.
I mean, big factor for sure.
Yeah, it lives in just like speakers in a room. It lives in the environment and performs in the environment to which you've given it. It kind of defines what your end result is. I mean, you could put a $1 million projection rig in a crappy room, just like $1 million pair of speakers in a crappy room, and the result will be bad.
Right. Yeah, I was just explaining to a buddy of mine about the importance of room treatments for your acoustics, and to my point was you can buy the most expensive speaker in the world and stick it into a concrete stairwell.
Yeah,
it's going to sound terrible.
And it's something to consider first in the room. If you're building in a room, you have control of this new house, whatever. That's the first phone number you call is the Anthony Grimanis, the Niall Mellors, the Matthew Poes. I mean, these guys, they can design your room at least for step one, it's the proper shape. Like even a few inches here, a few inches there, like you can pay massive dividends in the end.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, if you're constrained with what you're constrained, obviously those guys, they totally know what to do with, room treatments and reflection points and, tons of improvements with that. But each step you take toward the end, you're reducing their ability to solve that.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So we've got acoustics here. So center channel speakers, we touched on this a little bit, but this is a great image here, especially what's shown down in the left part of the slide.
That's a lot of those home theater images we'd see in the magazines from years ago. I mean, the projectors were more limited too, but we'd always see like 103-inch diagonal screen, and it'd be this like $1 million room with themes going on and amazing speakers, but it had this little tiny projector. And the reason they had to do that is they had to dodge their speakers, and so you got a small image and a sound field that does this. The speakers can't sound the same oriented this way versus this way. And so the solution on the right is keep everything vertical, everything perfectly identical. Sound image goes across, the acoustics go across, and they're treated the same, and you get a bigger image to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you can get that center channel out of there and replace it with the same speaker that you're using for your left and right channels, that's optimal.
Oh yeah.
Now, there are some center channels that are designed better than others.
Oh yeah.
Where the tweeter is over top of your mid-range and then flanked by woofers. Essentially,
it seems non-intuitive. There's a non-intuitive aspect of the speaker's behavior in the room. People think that the wider speakers, and so you get lots of speakers this way, they think, oh, you're doing that to improve, the horizontal dispersion across the room. Mm-hmm. Actually, the opposite is true. So the more you've drawn this speaker out into redundant drivers, it becomes a cylinder, and it's more like a line array laying on its side. Mm-hmm. And line arrays have a cylindrical radiation pattern. So you're actually making off-axis seating worse. The solution is rotate that, keep it vertical. So vertical has poor floor-to-ceiling response, but has much better side-to-side. So think of it like a taller can, I guess, and you're able to, or a light, and you're able to disperse out. Mm-hmm. But it's not intuitive because people think horizontal speakers, better horizontal sound. The inverse is actually.
Right. And all the marketing materials, I mean, you see these speakers deployed, right? You never see a front three of the same speaker.
Very rarely, yeah. I mean, almost every speaker company has to sell their center channel speaker, even though technically it shouldn't have to exist. Right.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in my room, I had to keep mine because of the distance from the wall to the screen. I just couldn't fit another of the same tower, but I'm really happy with this center channel that I have. So, but I also have a very narrow, my room is not very wide. So as you go off axis, you really can't hear that difference.
And even, a wide array of speakers, if it's one seat, you're fine. It's just as you try to have better coverage in width, and that's where you're entering more trade-offs.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of arguments for AT screen here.
Yeah, that's why I started this gig.
Yeah.
So this is an example. I mean, especially if you can get it behind the image. Oftentimes the room designer in the family then cares less about how crazy you're going to get with the speakers. So we get people, I think our record is about 22,000 watts of subs right behind the speaker or screen. And in theory, they could move that. That's actually never really happened in practice. But you can put as much motor power as you can afford behind there. And then you get just natural dynamics. You get better acoustic dispersion. You can get arguably you can get better cohesiveness, understandability, intelligibility, I guess, to the image or sound. Sorry, And I argue that's one of the biggest problems we have in home theaters is that with these little horizontal thingies down low, tucked into a cabinet, people can't understand what's going on. And so they turn the volume up and then a gunshot or an explosion happens and everybody's blown out of their seats.
Right.
And then Dolby comes out with, was it Dolby Late Night or something to do the compression so that, to reduce that effect. But that's all the opposite direction. Really step one is doing the best acoustic practice in the first place.
Right. Right. Now, a quick question for you. I mean, you see these giant subs in that image on the right side there. When those things are cranking behind an acoustically transparent screen, are you getting movement on the screen?
Theoretically, we've had people run test tones and they get down, below 20, down in the teens. If you get within a few inches and you're firing your port right into the screen, they can get it to move.
Yeah.
But in practice, again, don't fire the ports right into the screen.
Right.
Sealed works better. If you do have ports, keep them down low. Maybe rotate the sub 90 degrees. I mean, there's some easy ways to solve that. Just a little more airspace behind the screen can help. So it's not a practical problem.
Okay. Someone in chat asked if it's a good idea to use a studio near field speaker as a surround speaker.
Oh, they can be. Yeah, they can be fantastic. I've heard like tannoys, in near field response, and especially on the sides where you're probably going to be close to them, but having that closer convergence of their acoustics. KEF is fantastic for this too. Like their uni-Q driver. I mean, the convergence, you don't have to set a ways for things to converge. You can be close.
Right.
They sound fantastic.
There you go. Yeah, especially if you're seating, I guess if you're seating as far away from the speakers, maybe not as much.
Yeah, not as much. Then I love the properties of line arrays. So we got the picture there showing. I think this guy made his own line arrays in that right channel speaker, but right picture. But line arrays tend to radiate as a cylinder, and then their attenuation is less. So the front row is almost as the back row is almost as loud as the front row. I mean, so you don't get that as much attenuation with distance. So line arrays can sound fantastic.
Yeah, which makes them good speakers for concerts.
Yes.
Right, concert environments.
Yeah, I love them.
Let's see. Someone else is asking. He's in the market to purchase one of your screens, and the home theater guru truly went through his Seymour-Screen. Will Sony still perform as good? I'm not sure if I understand the question. Will Sony Projector still perform as well?
Yeah, they're beautiful. I mean, the limitations are usually number one, the room, and then number two, the screen that you put in within the room. But whether it's a Sony or a JVC, I mean, they're fantastic. We've demoed with I think every brand out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen those demos, Chris, by the way. I mean, you and I met several years ago looking at your and later, I know a bazillion people are going through Cedia, but they're always fun. I mean, they just look so good. So
that's what it's about. I love the demos. I wish that it wasn't just professionals. We could actually open that up to the public, because man, I'd love like friends and family to be able to experience this. What we get to experience kind of every day. Yeah,
it's really cool when you see it, and it's a lot easier to make your decisions and understand what's going on when you can go to a place like Cedia and sit down and see it with your own eyes rather than just reading about it on the internet.
Yeah, because it's hard. Like if I just show up with a card table to just say, hey, I make screens, and I wave a white piece of material from it, like, hey, look at our screen, isn't this great? You don't really get it. I can set you down though, and then give you a proper demo and point to the aspects of which you're experiencing and why we do what we do.
Yeah, and okay, so I mean, we've been talking a lot about AT screens and the importance of, I guess this is basically showing the difference between your material, the Enlighter Neo, and a micro-perf screen.
Yep. And so on the left set of pictures, that upper one shows how sound and air, I mean, just like the clothes you're wearing, they have a permeability, an air breathability to them. So we design our material so that the sound permeates through, and around all of those little tiny threads, the sound just goes through it like shown in the diagram. Versus if I took a sheet of something that's otherwise not acoustically transparent, 90% not acoustically transparent, and the other 10% are holes, you actually then get that re-radiating point source like you're seeing there. And that contributes to the lobing and the comb filtering of off-axis response. It can get really hashy in the mid-range, or lower treble, I should say. And you can't really EQ that away because it's different for every seat. The THX had specifications in theaters where the whole wall behind the screen is covered in really absorbent material. And that's because that 90% of the screen is reflecting that sound back to the wall. And if you want to minimize that back and forth, that transient smearing and echo almost from that wall. So acoustically, there's a million reasons why wovens are almost always better than perfs.
Right.
And then
I guess also visually speaking too, right? I mean, if you have holes in your screen, you're losing light through those holes.
Yes, and even today, there's folks I love and respect and they'll still argue the visual superiority of the perforated screen down below, and that's great. I love having those discussions, but that was one of the things we're trying to solve. Those is that we don't want to lose information. We're not dropping pixels. It's a totally smooth looking experience. So it'll look like a solid screen, but it'll perform acoustically like a fabric. And the clothing metaphor I would use is, this is your breathable fabric, and the perf screen would be that mesh shirt that you used to wear at high school. So don't do that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And, after I've had the Enlighter Neo installed in my room for about a week, and I have not rerun Direct yet, just because I have some review gear, some other AVRs I'm going to be reviewing. So I just haven't had the time to redo it. But just in my couple movies that I've watched in the week, I can't hear a single scintilla of difference. I think your literature says it cuts about decibel and a half.
Yeah. So what happens is if you just start with a sheet and holes in it, the movie theater is even worse. It looks like BB gun size holes, right? If you shrink those holes and increase the density, it turns it, instead of attenuation on the high frequency, I guess your perspective would be over here. So high frequency raw, it goes out in higher frequency, but then a fabric turns it into just a general pressure gradient. So it's not phase dependent. It's not frequency dependent. You just do a level setting. And that's why our materials are used by leading speaker companies at CEDIA. Every CEDIA will have a lot of demo screens out there, because we're not changing the tonality of their speakers. They don't have to re-EQ them. We're not changing the seat to seat variability. They just do a pressure level calibration, and it's perfecto.
Interesting. Chris, I think we had to reset the clock about 3 times. We're at an hour and 7 minutes. So tell me when you're feeling like the time has come for you to say goodbye. Just let me know if.
I think we're almost done. I've actually even just got a slide, the next one, showing. This was the Audioholics a series of videos you can go watch. I love watching their films or their videos. Got a lot of great information. Obviously, as the screen guy, I'm raising my hand. Their reference quality screen that their experts recommended had this acoustic chart that you're seeing here. Now that center line would be their speaker's response. And,
the blue line there.
Yep. The orange line is what then they measured after they put the screen on top.
Yeah. A lot of attenuation, high frequency.
Yeah, this is a perforated screen, and they're getting up to 15 dB attenuation. Now, to me, that's not acoustically transparent at all. I don't understand. I mean, that's just a bad product. Right. But fortunately for Gene's reference theaters, he's got amazing speakers, RBH. They can actually handle a 12 dB correction. So, kudos for him having the hardware to do that. But the normal person's speaker, I wouldn't throw 12 dB onto their tweeters and expect them to be able to listen at loud levels and not lose product.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you risk damaging your gear for sure. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So there's just some examples. There's an example. We have installations at mastering studios and some. So the feedback we get from the commercial installations is good and validating. And that's kind of where it's interesting, where you've got this overlap of a material that we'll sell to people, through the forums, direct online, $200. You could have a screen, a roll of screen material. You can have the exact same screen material that the studios use to master the film in the first place. And maybe their screen is $50,000. I don't know. It depends on how big and fancy it gets with the masking. And like in this picture, I think, we're using, 2 guys on a scissor lift. I mean, that starts to get a little pricey, but
for sure.
But the material doesn't change. I mean, you're still experiencing at home, this material that they're using, and they can have anything.
Is this at a studio or is it at somebody's home here?
This was actually at a studio.
Yeah. But you had mentioned, also for those watching that, a lot of Hollywood folks have Seymour-Screen stuff in their own homes.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah. And they're usually protected by, they'll launch their own kind of a LLC for the project, and it further, keeps them less liable for if, somebody slips and falls during the installation, then they're even less liable. But a lot of it's for proprietariness as well, so that we don't get to know always who it goes to. Occasionally too. That's fun. Kind of the inside movie fans.
That's really cool. It's got to be
we'll have our little girl squeal when we see the address it's shipping to.
It's got to be really cool to have that happen, to know that somebody that you respect at that level that's creating the content that you're showing is choosing your own product.
Yeah, we get reflections from them saying, you're in Iowa and you're doing this, right?
That's right. It's all hand built in Iowa.
Yeah, we like our corn too. So that.
Well, I got to say, my room looks nothing like this.
It could.
It could.
I know people.
Maybe in a couple, 10 more years.
I know some people.
And there's the video. So that's the end of our slideshow. Let me see here. Got too many mice. There you are. Let me ask you a few questions. We have some questions from folks. And okay, so we talked about trade-offs between an AT screen and light loss. So we touched on that. This is SRW1000. His name's Scotty. He's an AV NIRVANA member. And he wanted to dig into aspect ratios. He wanted to know what the most common ratios you sell today are, and do you think that's going to be changing over time, and what will become more popular?
We're probably we do a lot with movie buffs and obviously with the AT screens, but we're probably 50-50 with scope versus 16:9. If you just threw a movie out there, obviously with everybody's flat panels, 16:9 is the shape to fit, but it doesn't have that cinematic look to it. So I don't see anything converging. I mean, the 2.0 ratio and that thing in the middle, like I mentioned, is cool. But as long as you have the Zack Snyders and pushing things taller, James Cameron, and then you got the Hateful Eight going wider. I mean, they're not agreeing on that at all. We're not seeing this convergence.
I guess if commercial cinema just completely
goes away. And
you're looking at streaming only. I mean, he did mention that as streaming becomes more and more popular, do you think you'll have that converted? But right now you're not seeing that. You're seeing
still the majority of films are produced in scope ratio because just the look of it, it's legit. But obviously, tons of things are being made for 16:9 too.
Yeah. You think the IMAX enhanced?
So they're going tall too. So you come out with your CinemaScope ratio looking thing, and they're like, "Hey, we're IMAX enhanced." Boop, they pop it back up to about a 16:9.
Right.
And people liked that too. IMAX, that's their shtick. Is you go into an IMAX theater and there's like almost no ceiling, no floor. You kind of get this overwhelmed feeling.
Yeah.
So they love tall. It's all about that.
Yeah. Interesting choice. I mean, it's my preference is the CinemaScope. But I know a lot of folks out there love the taller image. So, okay. So Jay Stewart, another AV NIRVANA member, he says, do screens have a typical lifespan And how can you tell when it's time to replace an older screen?
That's a great question. They shouldn't, using today's materials, they really shouldn't have a lifespan. I'm thinking the older PVCs, those can have an aging to them, and they can become yellowed, especially if you're smoking and stuff, or environmental effects, dust and dirt or whatnot. But the PVCs the last 20 years have been really, really good. I mean, there's the stabilizers that are in them and UV protection. So I haven't replaced old screens because our screens have gotten old. Maybe we're not old enough to do that, but we haven't had any of ours time out from a materials perspective. It's usually, I went this way and now I want to go bigger, or I want to go taller or wider. Some room change kicks them into replacing the product, because that's the biggest change, is just configuration type. We're able to go much bigger. We've got 2-3 times as bright projectors these days as we did 10, 15 years ago.
Right. For sure. Yeah. And speaking of brightness, he has another question for you, Jay Stewart. Do high gain screens improve the HDR experience? And if so, can it be a significant difference? And I think we had mentioned a couple of days ago when you and I were talking, we were going to talk about HDR and gain, and we didn't quite touch on that today yet, but this is a good opportunity to do that.
I would argue in most cases it doesn't. HDR is not a brightness format. There's no B in there. The D stands for dynamic, and the floor of dynamic starts at 0 black level. Then as you're able to peak up beyond that, that's your contrast ratio, and that's great. And you can fill up your color bucket. Now, the state of the art would be for HDR in a projected sense would be Dolby Cinema. You go there, they got their 6 laser projectors that can go from 0 output to a beautifully rich, saturated, all 6 colors. And the color volume I've experienced in their installations is fantastic. But again, they're setting their white levels at about 31 foot Lamberts, which is about double what we were doing before with a standard dynamic range. But it's not this flat panel world of 500 nits or 1,000 nits or 10,000 nits or so. Like you'd have to have like 20 or 50 projectors to actually pull that off. And you're only pulling a minuscule part of the picture information. Less than 5% of data is for that specular highlights, so the flashlight in the eyeballs, which can sometimes be nice, but isn't always cinematic. I mean, that's that kind of departure from cinematic to a flat panel, and the flat panels will be able to pull that off. But a Dolby Cinema, they'll round that out. So they'll give you that full 31 foot Lamberts of information. But if your average picture level is not supposed to go up with HDR versus SDR, it's supposed to be the same. They did not actually want people's HDR televisions to be twice as bright, 3 times as bright for average picture information, because they're worried about energy consumption. And so they're only allowing that brightness for the peak information. But white level is still the same, SDR, HDR. So cranking up your gain of your screen will get you brighter peaks, but it'll also get your, it could have higher black levels too. Your projected black levels will go up. But, it may solve your white ceiling problem too. So there's that. But I like, there's a video, Chris Deering did a presentation with JVC projectors, and he was arguing for the benefits of a good black level. You'll have a more dynamic the more dynamic looking image than it would be if you went some office projector that's 10 times brighter or something, but its black levels are up higher too. Right. That'll look less dynamic, even though it's punching higher white levels.
Cool. Chris, there's someone in chat here who has, his name's Gary, has a question. He said he saw a recent podcast by Tony of Build Montage showing off a UST projector paired with a 100-inch 4K, paper thin, 2.05 high gain on-wall screen. When is screen gain too high?
Yeah, it kind of depends on how you pull that off. Stuart makes great screens that are white and also high gain. So you can, one of the big sellers for them is that StudioTech ST130. It's a 1.3 gain, so you're down at a very responsible level. But they've got screens that'll punch up even higher than that, like at 1.7, I think is that they have, and that can be done more realistically looking because your substrate is white, and so the substrate's contributing, their reflective coating is contributing. That whole thing looks great. Where you start getting into these crazy gain levels above 2, usually they're using, it's very mirror-like material. And then that starts to have a lot of trade-offs. So I've never been a fan of like the Silver Star screens, I think that ViewTech used to make. That whole thing. High powers can look nice, but those were made for data projection in office environments. Those were never made for home cinema.
Yeah. So try and keep. You were saying earlier, try to keep the screen gain below 2.
And I guess a response question would be: is how much uniformity you want? And if your answer is 100%, you have to stick with a Lambertian scatter screen, a white screen. But you can go to a movie theater and they usually put silver screens up because they want to do 3D if they can. In the typical movie theater, you'll have 25% dimmer on the corners than you will in the middle.
Yeah.
And that may be an effect that you wouldn't notice unless somebody pointed it out to you. So it's on the threshold of being perceivable, but 25% non-uniformity. I mean, that's pushing it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. 2 more questions, and then I'm going to let you go.
Okay.
Get back to your day. Kieran from Twitter. He is asking if screens marketed as 4K really matter. Won't any screen project an image from a 4K projector?
Mostly, yes. So the resolution argument in screens is mostly phantom. If the screen has features, though, and that feature size is competitive with a pixel size, then that's where you start losing resolution. So the perforated screens, cinema perf ones are terrible. That's why they don't even really exhibit with 4K very often. It's usually just a 2K projector. But you have even the microburst for home theater, you're losing about 500,000 pixels through that image. Just the pixels go right through. You can't get them back no matter what you do. So those I consider resolution limited products and materials. But if you don't have that feature, then there's no resolution limit at all. So if it's a solid white screen, or if it's something that looks like our woven screens looks white. I mean, this wall behind me has no features. It's got maybe a little bit of texturing to it, but no real features. I mean, I could throw any resolution on that. There's no limit to it. It's not like the information's going anywhere.
Are there any older non-AT materials that obviously they would reflect a 4K image, but what it's reflecting isn't true 4K? Is it being eaten up by some kind of variation on the surface of the?
Maybe, yeah. So if you had some older screens would have an embossed texture on them. The information's still there. It's just it's kind of shot around, or old silver screens where it's like big silver flecks everywhere. Again, that's kind of shot everywhere. You could probably still show a checkerboard pattern and 4K resolution just fine, but it's not like those pixels are really going anywhere. Okay. Yeah, it's mostly a non-argument with. I mean, a sheet of paper is 4K or 16K or whatever you want to call it.
So the answer basically is if you are happy with your screen, you're upgrading from Blu-ray or HD, standard HD to 4K, you're probably going to be okay.
Yeah, holes are limited.
You have a microperf screen, then
holes limit. Those lenticular lens, the ziggy-zaggy screens, I guess, like the ultra shorts, those have a resolution limit. They're fine. They look great, but those have a feature size that you can measure, and then that's your limitation.
Okay. All right. And last question is from Brian Fuller on Twitter. And this is somebody that or you've interacted with. He said he's tried out some samples of acoustically transparent screens by securing them under the frame on his existing screen. And he was shocked at how much dimmer the image was compared to his current standard screen, which is a 1.1 gain. Would he see more light reflection from the AT samples with a proper black backing attached? And then he has one follow-up question for you. But in terms of that, I mean, he basically sounds like he has a sample that he's put on top of his white screen, and he's saying the image is looking more dim. And if he put black backing on that, would that actually make the image look brighter?
The other way around, actually. So
Yeah.
So if you just put your material on a screen, like you'll get actually splashed back from behind the screen because of the screen.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah. Do the other. We always say make it black behind the image, otherwise you'll get a false impression. It'll look too bright. It won't look accurate. And the woven screens, they are sponges. They will eat up light. It's not that the light goes away. So these installers that say, you lose your picture, light going through it. Well, turn up the light too. I mean, it's an amplitude problem, not an information problem. So if the gain is down 20%, the net is 0.8, and say he started from a 1.1. So he's got about a 30% reduction in his amplitude of light. If you could, open up your projector, put it in a higher light lamp mode, or, you can compensate for that. But yeah, ambient light screens, unless you start with like an ambient vision air and then punch holes in it, and we're doing that now. You can your net of nets will usually be a lower gain.
Okay.
Now, black backing is usually not required. We ship it with every one of our Neo screens. So like the material you have, we always include it because it is a super, super fine material, and it has a translucence to it. Even some solid vinyl screens can have a translucence to them if they're not very thick, but we want to absorb that light behind there so we don't get any contamination back. The way to measure that, or just do a rough check to see if that's a problem, is end of movie credits, white credits, black screen. See if you can see any haloing, any kind of a double image, any lightning. You could even put something dark behind the screen over half of it and see if half the screen looks better than the other. But with our PVC coated acoustically transparent screen, almost nobody uses black backing unless you got white walls or something like apartment. But the woven, the uncoated product, almost it's much more used.
Okay. And his follow-up question, he wonders about the differences between the Enlighter Neo, which is a Seymour-Screen Excellence, and the Center Stage UF. And let me actually, before you answer that, I'm not sure if I can make you, here you go.
Whoa.
There you go. Solo shot.
So you personal space.
Samples there to show. Maybe
6 feet
quickly you could just describe the difference between the two companies also. I mean, the two brands, if you want to call it that.
So Seymour AV developed a product that has to be DIY friendly. I mean, I need to be able to sell you a piece of the material, and you could take a staple gun to it and attach it to the wall or to your own frame. It's got to be able to hold that and be pretty simple to use. When we transition to then our CEDIA targeted company, where we're selling through professional installers and dealers that have experience doing these things, then that staple gun approach is not as important. And so then we used grip track, and that allows us to use finer materials. So the UF material, I actually have a sample of it here, is a fine woven material. See if I can capture any from the light. See if I can capture any kind of a texture to it in the camera.
A little bit,
Just cover my face here. That'd be all right. So this material, I would say, I wouldn't want to sit closer than about 6 feet from this, which is pretty good. I mean, not too many people are really closer than 6 feet to their screen. It's a heavier material that can handle grommets for our screens or staple gun again. But then the Neo is almost like if you took this and you shrunk it in half. Let's see if I can actually get both here. But if you took the thread, the weave, the coarse, or the texture, almost shrunk it in half, you'd get the Neo, and it's a thinner material, not translucent visually, but it's a thinner material that I don't want to put staples and grommets through there. I want it perfectly tensioned all the way around the product. Okay. And this you can actually set. We have studios that have this across from their mixing consoles, so 3 feet. I mean, you can put your nose up to it and not see any kind of texture.
Okay. Cool. And in terms of if your average enthusiast wants to purchase, let's say, a Seymour-Screen Excellence, do they have to go through a dealer, or can they call you directly, or what's the preferred mode for purchasing?
We through a dealer, through an installer. We have installers and dealers almost everywhere in the country. I've had a few corners where there's no one there to help them, and I'm always willing to help somebody somehow. And so we're happy to talk with them. As much we can talk carpet colors and speakers as much as anyone. But we like to make that perfect because even if it's not our product, the end result has to be good. I mean, customers got to be happy.
Okay, awesome. Speaking of that, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they wanted to?
So we have the two websites. The Seymour AV, which is that kind of consumer direct. These are the folks like are on your forums and your podcast. They're researching things. They know what they're talking about. They know what speakers they want, what projector they want. They're a self-informed type customer, probably a do-it-yourselfer, probably going to attach their own screen and hang it onto the wall. The company for them is a Seymour AV. All the prices are shown. You click the cart, call and talk to Jess or John or myself, or again, and we interact with them directly. If you're the not self-informed consumer and you're commissioning the room, I would say you're probably involving a dealer or a custom installer there. That's a CD, a channel. We call those customers clients then in that case. So when then we have a dealer network, we can advise who to go to. We have sales reps, and that site is at the Seymour-Screen Excellence website. And it's common for one way or another. So we'll answer the phone either way and help you however we can.
Awesome. And I'll drop links to both of those websites in the description. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, that's how they can find you. And this is going to be posted. This stream is going to be posted on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So anybody that jumped in a little late, you can go watch it there as soon as it posts, which should be within the hour or maybe immediately. I'm not quite sure exactly how that works. And if you have any questions for Chris directly based off this video, you can always go over to AV NIRVANA on our homepage right now. We have a story about this stream. And you can ask a question there. I can get in touch with Chris and get an answer for you. And aside from that, Chris, thank you so much for all the great things that you're doing within the industry, but also for taking time to hang out with us today and talk shop. I hope this helped some people out there figure out some good directions and how they want to attack their home theater experience.
It's complicated and can feel overwhelming, but it's this is fun. Like this isn't, a plumbing part of your house. This is the fun part. This is the entertainment room, right? So it's worth it.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Todd.
Okay. All right. Bye. If you enjoy content like this, hit like, subscribe, and then join the conversation on avnirvana.com.